Hello and welcome to Cognitive Drift. That line captures something most of us feel deep down. The universe doesn't just exist, it feels impossibly strange that it does at all. And yet, here we are, talking about it, trying to make sense of it. Why is there something instead of nothing? Why does anything exist? These are the kinds of questions that don't just live in textbooks or debates. They live in the quiet moments, when we stare at the night sky and wonder what's behind it all. But here's where things get interesting. The question itself assumes there must be some ultimate reason, some grand cause. For a lot of human history, that assumption pointed us toward gods or creators. The logic felt simple. Things don't just appear, something must make them. If you find a watch on the ground, you assume there was a watchmaker. So if the universe is the ultimate watch, there must be an ultimate watchmaker, right? That argument sounds convincing until you ask the next question. If everything needs a cause, then what caused the creator? The answer is usually something like, the creator just exists, it's beyond time, it needs no explanation. But if that's allowed, then why can't the universe, or the laws behind it, just exist too? If we're going to stop asking why at some point, it's hard to see why we stop at a god instead of the cosmos. And this is where physics and philosophy start to pull at the same thread. The more we've learned about the universe, the less it looks like something that needs a supernatural hand. In fact, the biggest discoveries of the last century, relativity, quantum mechanics, the Big Bang, all point to a reality where nothing is a lot more complicated than it sounds. When people imagine nothing, they picture an empty void. But that's not what nothing really means in physics. Even in the deepest vacuum, quantum fields ripple. Particles flicker in and out of existence. It's not magic, it's math. It's how energy behaves at its most fundamental level. So when scientists talk about the universe coming from nothing, they don't mean a perfect, featureless emptiness. They mean something closer to a quantum state, with no classical matter, but still governed by the rules of physics. And those rules allow for spontaneous fluctuations. In other words, the laws of nature themselves can produce universes. It's not that the Big Bang happened for a reason, it's that under the right conditions, it couldn't not happen. But does that really answer the question? Not entirely. Because then we ask, why do those laws exist? Why are there any rules at all? And here the honest answer might be the most unsettling one. Maybe there isn't a reason. Maybe existence is just a brute fact, something that has no deeper explanation. That's hard for us to accept because our brains evolved to see causes everywhere. It's a survival feature. If you hear a rustle in the grass, it pays to assume there's a predator. So we built a mental world where everything must have an origin, a design, or a purpose. But the universe isn't required to fit the instincts of a primate brain. Still, if we resist the urge to plug in an easy answer, a bigger picture starts to appear. We see that asking why does the universe exist might be like asking what's north of the North Pole. It's a question that assumes something that might not be true, that existence needs an outside explanation. But what if existence is the default? What if nothing is the weird thing? After all, if nothing truly means no laws, no potential, no properties, then it might be the least stable state imaginable. As soon as you have even the tiniest rule, like energy must be conserved, you've got the seed of a universe. And here's another wrinkle. The universe we see might not be the only one. Some versions of quantum theory and cosmology suggest a multiverse. Countless universes bubbling up from a deeper reality, each with different physical constants. If that's true, then our universe doesn't need a special reason to exist. Any more than this specific wave on the ocean needs a reason. Waves happen because the ocean is there. Universes happen because reality allows them. And we just happen to be in one where conditions allow life to notice it. But let's pause here. None of this means the question is meaningless. It means the answer might be bigger than the question can hold. We want a reason because reasons make us feel safe, like the universe is a story written for us. But what if it's not a story? What if it's an endless field of possibilities, and existence is just what happens when possibility never runs out? If there's one thing that stands out about humans, it's our need for meaning. We're not just curious about how things work, we want to know why. Why is there life? Why do we exist? And ultimately, why does anything exist at all? That craving for purpose isn't a flaw in our thinking, it's a survival mechanism. Societies run on shared meanings. Personal lives are built on stories that make sense of chaos. Without those stories, we feel lost, fragile. So when we look at the universe, we naturally project the same pattern. If we have reasons, the cosmos must have one too. This instinct to see purpose everywhere is called teleology, the idea that things exist for a reason, like tools with a specific function. We see the sun and assume it's there to give us light. We see trees and assume they exist to provide shade or food. But the sun doesn't rise for us, it burns because gravity and fusion make it burn. Trees don't grow for our benefit. They grow because random mutations over millions of years made them good at surviving. Evolution is a blind process, no foresight, no design. Yet our minds struggle to see that. We are meaning-making machines, even when meaning isn't really there. And that's why arguments from design feel so convincing. You look at the complexity of a cell, the precision of physical constants, and you think, this can't be an accident. But that feeling comes from a misunderstanding. Complexity doesn't require intention. It requires rules and time. Snowflakes form intricate patterns without anyone planning them. Crystals grow in perfect symmetry without a designer. Life emerged because chemistry favors certain arrangements of molecules. And given billions of years, those arrangements become mind-bogglingly complex. What feels like design is often just the outcome of simple rules repeating endlessly. This brings us to the so-called fine-tuning problem. People often say, the universe seems perfectly set up for life. Change the strength of gravity or the charge of an electron even slightly, and life couldn't exist. That sounds like evidence of a cosmic engineer. But think about what's really being said. Of all possible universes, only a narrow range could host life like ours. But is that surprising? We wouldn't be here asking the question in a universe where life wasn't possible. That's the anthropic principle in action. It's not deep philosophy, it's basic probability. If billions of universes exist, or if the laws of physics allow countless configurations, then it's inevitable that some will look fine-tuned. We happen to live in one of those, because where else could we live? Still, people often find that answer emotionally unsatisfying, and that's important to notice. Our dissatisfaction isn't evidence of a creator, it's evidence of how our brains work. We want neat answers, we want closure, but reality isn't obligated to give us that. Sometimes the truth is bigger and messier than we like, and in this case, the truth might be that the universe has no ultimate purpose, and that's okay. The lack of cosmic purpose doesn't mean our lives can't have meaning. It means meaning isn't handed down from above. It's something we build from the ground up. Ironically, when we let go of the idea that the universe exists for us, something liberating happens. We stop being characters in a story someone else wrote. We become authors. Meaning isn't scarce, it's something we create through relationships, discoveries, acts of kindness, and moments of wonder. The night sky doesn't need a reason to exist to make it beautiful. It's beautiful because we're here to see it. That's not a small thing. Consciousness itself is a rare spark in an indifferent cosmos, and that makes it precious beyond measure. But let's push further. If we say the universe might exist just because, are we done? Not quite. Because there's still the question of why there are laws of physics at all. Where do they come from? Here's one possibility. Maybe the laws aren't fundamental. Maybe they're emergent, patterns that arise from deeper, more basic rules, or from mathematical necessity. In some theories, like Max Tegmark's mathematical universe, reality is nothing but math. All possible mathematical structures exist, and our universe is simply one of them. If that sounds strange, it should, but it's not stranger than the alternative, that a conscious being just decided to create a universe one day. And if reality is mathematical, that changes the question from why does the universe exist to why does math exist? And maybe that's a question without an answer, or one where existence and math are the same thing. Maybe what we call existence is simply the unfolding of logical possibilities. If something can exist, it will, and here we are. That might sound unsatisfying, but consider this. When you flip it around and ask why there's nothing instead, that option makes even less sense. Absolute nothingness isn't just empty. It's the absence of possibility. And if that's true, then existence isn't the mystery, nothingness is. The more we dig into this question, the more it exposes a strange truth. Sometimes the question itself is the problem. Why does the universe exist sounds simple, but it assumes that existence is something that needs a cause, like a chair needs a carpenter. But what if why only makes sense inside the universe, not outside it? When we ask why it rains, there's an answer: evaporation, condensation, pressure. When we ask why stars shine, we talk about nuclear fusion. But when we ask why reality itself exists, what would a satisfying answer even look like? If someone told you the universe exists because of God, wouldn't you just ask, okay, so why does God exist? You end up in an infinite regress or with a final brute fact, and either way you have to stop somewhere. That's what philosophers like Bertrand Russell meant when they said, the universe is just there, and that's all. It's not a cop-out. It's an admission that not every question points to an answer. Some questions are artifacts of how our brains work, not reflections of reality. Our minds evolved to navigate a world of agents and intentions. We see purpose behind everything, because that's how you survive on the savannah. If you hear a rustle and assume there's a lion, you live. If you assume it's the wind, you might not. That bias keeps us alive. But it also tricks us into thinking the universe itself must have a purpose. Now let's pull this into modern science. In cosmology, there's growing evidence that the universe might be self-contained. It doesn't require anything outside it to exist. The equations of general relativity describe a space-time that curves back on itself, like the surface of a sphere. If time is part of that structure, then asking what came before the universe might be like asking what's north of the North Pole. It's a category mistake. Time began with the Big Bang, at least in the sense that our concept of before stops making sense beyond that point. But physics goes even further. Some interpretations of quantum mechanics suggest that the universe could be a quantum fluctuation, a temporary blip in a larger reality, governed by probability rather than intention. In that view, universes are constantly forming and dissolving, like bubbles in a cosmic foam. That might sound speculative, and it is, but it's not pulled from thin air. It comes from equations that have already predicted things like virtual particles and cosmic inflation, both of which we've observed indirectly. If universes can emerge from quantum fields, then existence might not need a reason any more than waves need a reason to ripple across a pond. Still, let's step back from physics for a moment and look at psychology. Why do we want to reason so badly? Studies in cognitive science show that humans are wired to seek explanations, especially for big events. When something dramatic happens, an earthquake, a death, a life-changing coincidence, we instinctively look for intention behind it. That's the root of superstition and conspiracy thinking. Our brains hate randomness. We prefer a bad explanation to no explanation at all. The same impulse scales up when we think about the universe. Randomness feels intolerable. A purposeless cosmos feels empty. So we reach for comforting narratives like creation myths or divine plans. They make the chaos feel like order. But here's the twist. The universe doesn't become meaningful just because someone declares it so. Meaning isn't an ingredient of reality. It's a product of consciousness. It's something we invent, not something we discover. That's not bleak, it's empowering. If meaning were fixed and handed down, it would be rigid, unchangeable, indifferent to our needs. By creating meaning, we make life flexible. We can shape it, share it, question it. And when you think about it, that's more freedom than any cosmic script could offer. Now here's an idea that pushes the boundary even further. What if time itself is an illusion? Some physicists argue that time isn't fundamental, it's emergent, like temperature. That means the universe isn't a thing that began and then continued. It's a static whole, a block universe, where every moment exists at once. In that view, the question, why does the universe exist, is like asking why a novel exists. The story doesn't unfold because of some outside cause. It just is. And we experience it sequentially because that's how our brains process information. If that's true, then the universe doesn't happen, it simply exists as a timeless structure. That might sound abstract, but it has real implications. If time isn't fundamental, then before and after aren't cosmic realities. They're human perspectives. And that changes the question completely. Does that settle it? Not quite. Because there's still the deep mystery. Why any structure, any math, any possibility exists at all. And here, maybe the best answer is the simplest. Because it can. Because the alternative, true nothingness, isn't just improbable, it's impossible. You can't have a state with no properties, no rules, no potential. Even nothing is a concept, and as soon as you allow concepts, you allow possibility, and as soon as you allow possibility, you have existence. Reality isn't a question looking for an answer, it's the condition that makes questions possible in the first place. But before we wrap this up, let's push the boundaries even further. There's an idea that rarely makes it into casual conversations, but deserves a seat at the table. Maybe reality isn't physical at all, maybe it's informational. In recent decades, some physicists and philosophers have floated the concept that the universe behaves like a giant computation, not metaphorically, but literally. At its core, everything we see, matter, energy, even space-time, might be the product of underlying bits of information, flipping and processing according to mathematical rules. This isn't science fiction. It's based on real patterns in quantum theory and thermodynamics, where entropy and information seem deeply intertwined. If that's true, the universe doesn't exist in the way we normally think. It's not a solid, objective thing out there. It's a dynamic pattern of relationships, a vast, self-updating code. And here's the kicker. If reality is information, then the question, why does the universe exist, becomes, why does information exist? And that might be like asking why truth exists, or why logic exists. These aren't things you can eliminate. They're not contingent on something else. They're necessary. If information is fundamental, then reality might exist because existence is the only game in town. It's not optional. If anything can exist, something will exist, and eventually, something will exist that asks why. Now let's consider consciousness in this picture. We often think of ourselves as tiny spectators in a vast, indifferent cosmos, and in terms of scale, that's true. But consciousness might not be an accident, not because the universe wanted us here, but because awareness is what happens when complexity crosses a certain threshold. If that's the case, then the ability to ask this question, why does the universe exist, is itself a natural product of the universe unfolding. And that makes the question beautiful, even if the answer is elusive. It's the cosmos looking back at itself through eyes and neurons that grew out of stardust. That's not poetry, it's physics and biology doing their quiet work over billions of years, until one day a creature looks up and wonders what it all means. And here's something worth noticing. Our desire for an ultimate answer might never be satisfied. Every answer leads to a deeper why. If we found out tomorrow that the universe came from a quantum fluctuation, we'd ask why quantum fields exist. If we learned that reality is a mathematical structure, we'd ask why math exists. This chain has no obvious end. But maybe that's the point. Maybe questions are the point. Maybe meaning isn't something we find at the end of the chain. Maybe it's something created by climbing it. And that changes everything, because if the universe has no built-in purpose, that's not a tragedy. It's an opportunity. A scriptless universe is one where we write the script, where meaning isn't dictated but discovered in the living of life, in laughter, in love, in ideas, in struggles that matter, because we decide they matter. The absence of a cosmic plan doesn't make our lives smaller, it makes them bigger, because nothing limits the meanings we can create except the limits of imagination. So why does the universe exist? Maybe because nothing else was ever possible. Maybe because nothing isn't a real option. Or maybe the question has no answer, because existence isn't the kind of thing that needs one. And that's okay. We don't need the universe to come with instructions. We don't need a reason carved into the fabric of space-time. What we need is right here, the capacity to wonder, to explore, to build meaning out of the raw material of chaos. That's not just enough, it's extraordinary. Because in the end, the universe might not care why it exists, but we care. And that's what makes us different from stars and galaxies and black holes. We're not just matter obeying laws. We're matter that woke up, matter that asks questions the stars will never ask. And maybe, just maybe, that's the closest thing to purpose we'll ever find. To be the part of the universe that wonders why the rest of it is here. And that's the answer I'll leave you with. Not a solution, but a perspective. The universe doesn't need a reason to exist. But as long as we're here, as long as we keep asking and learning and loving and laughing, we give it one. Thank you for watching. If you found this perspective thought-provoking, share it with someone who values reason and honest conversation. And if you'd like more content like this, where we question, analyze, and dig deeper, stick around. There's more to explore,